When black people wake up and become intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, as other humans are intellectually independent enough to think for themselves, then the black man will think like a black man, and he will feel for other black people. And this new thinking and feeling will cause black people to stick together. And then at that point, you'll have a situation where when you attack one black man, you are attacking all black men. And this type of black thinking will cause all black people to stick together. And this type of thinking also will bring an end to the brutality inflicted upon black people by white people. And it is the only thing that will bring an end to it. No federal court, state court, or city court will bring an end to it. It's something that the black man has to bring an end to himself.
Slavery.
Get ready for power. Prince's Power Hour podcast.
One, two, three into the.
It's my honor to be before you. It's been a few weeks we've been off. Been going on. We are here, we are back, and I believe we are back at the most appropriate time as we just had the national presidential election. You know, things that we spoke about previously, such as the Democratic National Convention, the several attacks on former president, now president-elect Donald J. Trump, and just the overall psychology of black people and how we have made the Democratic Party our new Christ. Lessons of the Afro-descended nation. That's beautiful. a man equips himself, and woman equips himself with enough knowledge that is tied into his freedom or her freedom, that they will be unable to remain a slave, that they will be incapable of not overcoming whatever obstacle or impediment is in their way, that they would, with enough information and applied knowledge, will then implement the necessary stratagem to change their trajectory. Intelligent masculinity is what I believe to make a man truly competent, right? Is the proper balance, homeostasis between contemplation and action. Let me say that again. To be a truly competent man, to be one who has the ability to perform in whatever his field of expertise may be, or to be able to perform whatever duty or task that is required of him, and to do it at a high level, to be proficient, he must have the proper balance of contemplation, meaning that he has thought out meticulously a stratagem on how he would approach said subject matter, and that he would also not be paralyzed by paralysis and analysis, but be able to implement and take actionable steps of his contemplation and meditation in the physical, tangible world to produce the desired result. I preface with that because we have come to the point intellectually that we are suffering because our pontification has not eradicated our current circumstance of psychological, physical, spiritual, and intellectual imprisonment. That we're thinking, we're talking, we're studying, but we're in such deep thought that to do winning to be our desire is to be free, to have the ability to be self-determining, and to have the ability to be in control of one's future and destiny, to define our reality, to define what our culture is, and to be able to act it out and perform it without outside interference or disruption, to control the dynamics of our own personal lives, our families, our communities, and ultimately our nation. To be a people that has the ability to self-determine. Freedom. True revolution is not concessions in one aspect of human endeavor or the another. It's not having a more comfortable seat at the former slave master's table, not to conform or acquiesce to the present day society which we have already identified that has been built on our permanent and perpetual degradation, that their impetus on continuing to promote their decadent society is to keep us in a forever degraded state. But it's to overcome that. True revolution is complete political control, complete economic control, complete spiritual and educational and dietary and agricultural control. That we ourselves have the ability to determine our future with our own efforts, our own toil, our own sacrifice, our own ingenuity, our own intellectual ability, our own physical, spiritual, and mental toil. That we will determine what's best for us and not you, not our enemy. So with that being said, why are we still in the same position, right? We pose this question again. You made such a bold statement at the outset. You said the slave master is not the one who's upholding our present day slavery, but it is the slave himself, because slavery is not being in physical chains and bonds. That's a prisoner of war. That's a captive. Slavery is a mentality. It is a psychology. And so our present day oppression is a current suppression of our nature. Now, a lot of us may not be conscious to the degree that you and I may be, that we cannot just articulate it, but to the best of our ability, function in our redemption. But nevertheless, the reality is the same. We suppress, whether it's what we believe out of survival, or that we ourselves have been compromised to the degree that we don't even think we could win. So we consciously align ourselves with our enemy so that we may be, even if we're not free, at least the overseers over other slaves. And it leads me to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, French philosopher and writer. He says, he's quoted saying, citizens consent to bear chains so that they may impose chains on others in turn. Let me break that down. Again, let me repeat it and then I'll break it down. Citizens consent to bear chains so they may impose chains on others in turn. One, if you look at the antebellum South, right? Chattel slavery was a social agreement between rich whites, landowners, the slave masters, the plantation owners, right? Those who are on the higher societal arc of the American civilization, and then the lower social stratum, right? Who they made overseers. Even a lot of European immigrants who trickled over here, who they placed under the stratum of the Anglo-Saxon Protestant whites, but they gave them a position of convenience. They didn't have the same social, economic status nor benefits of the slave masters, but they were given a constellation prize. No, you're not in power. Hell, you don't even control your own reality, but you can have a pseudo freedom and a pseudo power by being able to have the ability to lord over these Negroes and be their overseers, and to be able to, within reason, right, and still into the benefit of the slave master of the higher echelons, be able to impose their will on the slaves. So for them, white supremacy was born. That I, irrespective to my lot in life, no matter how ineffective I am, no matter how unintelligent I am, no matter how unimpressive I am, just because I have Caucasian skin and I am of the European family or sub-family, I have the ability to rape and pillage and to lord over these African black people. That was sufficient enough for me. And so they bought into the concept of white supremacy. So they had the economic chains on them, but it was a benefit to them because they were able to lord over those who had the physical chains over. It was a time in about 1820, 1830, where in particular those in Western America who were now getting these land grant deals where to expand the American territory under manifest destiny, meaning those who are familiar with that it was ordained by the Creator, by God, for white men to conquer the lands of the earth and the peoples of the earth. That was their God-given right, manifest destiny. So that ideology was, again, impregnated into the conscious minds of Europeans so that they can rape, pillage, and be able to impose their will on whatever indigenous people they came in contact with as they continued to expand and conquer the Northern Americas. Oh, it's a deep history, brothers and sisters, but it needs to be articulated. But when the American government And those powers to be, the financiers, were seeing the benefit in the expansion of the resources in the West in this uncharted territory, which they didn't want to personally, involve themselves with, because they had themselves a strong position, right, in the East, Philadelphia, New York, these particular places in Virginia, so forth and so on. They're now seeing the material wealth. They're now seeing the benefit. They're now seeing all of these things and the opportunities happening as America starts to expand. So now they, again, impose themselves on the poor whites. And so you had what they call eminent domain, that the American government, which are always the financiers, those who are backing the American, those who are the titans of industry, right? Those who are fronting the bills and putting or stuffing the financial coffers of the politicians. Those are the real leaders of America. They were coming to take the land. Then you start to see revolt from the white Europeans, and they started to partner themselves with some of the slaves who had this pseudo freedom that they were in the West, because at the time there were no structure for the American government as a system to impose slavery. So it was, for those who had the ability and those who didn't. So in most cases, blacks had like a pseudo freedom. Don't get me wrong, it was no egalitarian reality, but they wasn't the antebellum South. Wasn't as it was in the East. So you start to see them partner up. And so again, this effect came into more. Hold on. Okay, let's make a deal. You won't own the land, but it'll be yours, right? You'll have the industry over. We'll put you over these particular companies and these particular businesses, and we'll make you the mayor of this town, and we'll make you the sheriff of this town, and you'll control. And guess what? Those Negroes can be your slaves, and you will get the protection of the American government. So things like the Missouri Compromise and these different things were really thrown out the window. So you have places like California that supposedly didn't legalize slavery, but they did. Institutional racism was ingrained again into the subconscious of the people. So now you had, again, a non-documented binding agreement amongst the whites and Europeans relative to the social hierarchy. Citizens consent to bear change so they may impose change on others, and in turn, fast forward. Because as I stated before, you come to the reality that no longer was it advantageous, not just economically, but technically in being able to sustain slavery. They started breeding houses where they would develop in America through the worst conditions, through incest and all of these horrific, inhumane tactics, that they would create their own slave. And through this process, we were now being psychologically and sociologically developed in a way that we would take on a lot of the characteristics of the former slave master and the overseers. So then we too would accept slavery if we had a social hierarchy. So that's when you had the field slave and the house slave, and you had what was considered, where they say it was accurate, not the reality was, when you think about how he would pit light against the dark, field slave against the house slave, so forth and so on. So now you create a caste system within the black race who now perpetuates slavery because it allows them to have a pseudo-social status over others. And as long as somebody is beneath you perceivably, you don't look at psychologically your position for what it is. You don't internalize it for the depths that you fell into, because you perceive, I'm not at the bottom, so that's sufficient for me enough not to fight. i.e. the emergence of the black bourgeoisie, i.e. the emergence of the perceived black middle class, i.e. the emergence of the black intelligentsia, those who would be given certain concessions that they would perceive themselves to be accepted or ingratiated into the white European Anglo-Saxon society, and then even though they were still treated as niggas in every sense of the word, the fight was never to the degree that it should to bring on complete revolution, because there was always somebody lower. And that, brothers and sisters, was not just a product of happenstance or coincidence. That was intentional and direct. And we're seeing it play out now. Some of the worst instances of the black degraded state that we find ourselves in is upheld by those who share the same skin complexion as us. And it's unfortunate because those of us who know in itself is not the person, but who the person naturally is, it's not who the person naturally is. It's not their nature, but what they become makes them indistinguishable from who they should be, relative to who were they created to be. So they have taken on the characteristics and the attributes and the behavioral tactics of the slave master. So the only thing that separates, so teaches the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in these times from the white man and the black man is skin color. Why is that important? Because we have gotten to a point that every tactic, if you really, not every, because it's a few, and I ventured to discuss that, but primarily speaking, majority of our institutions in America, when you break it down to what seems to be the impetus that purport to move it further, is protests for integration. And I don't use that word cheaply, but what I mean is that we're trying to figure out how we can fit currently in the system that was never designed for us to be a part of. And what the enemy does is analogous or emblematic to what a magician does. You know it's not real, but hell, if you don't know what the actual trick is, again, you're hard pressed to, in your mind, rationalize what you're seeing. So you start at some point to believe the magic is what it is instead than a sleight of hand. In your mind, right? You're still like, I know it ain't real. Something's got to be going on, but I can't figure it out. So I'm just going to enjoy the spectacle of it. And that's what we've done. Then we take on the position, if I get a little closer, if I get a little bit more into it, if I do this, maybe I'll get the secrets, maybe I'll unearth something, right? Like we think that our way out is to go deeper into the thing. It's like we're working backwards. The opening is up top, but we're saying like, well, if I go deeper in it, maybe somehow I'll end up like those old cartoons. You keep digging all the way, you end up in China. It was this crazy thing. That's how we feel that we'll come out on the other side. The deeper we get, the more freer we'll become. But that doesn't work that way, brothers and sisters. It does not work that way. So, as I stated earlier in my opening, we just had a national election. And this is not the conversation, but I'm going to touch on it for a brief second, then I will get into the veggies. I'm a vegan, so I ain't going to say the meat and potatoes, but the veggie and potatoes of my subject. Is that when we look at a lot of the animosity that we're having towards each other based on our perceived voting preference. And those of us who we believe abandon the black race or black plight because either we voted for Donald J. Trump or we did not cast a vote at all at that level, or for Kamala, as if that was an act of treason, that we haven't since time immemorial, since our interaction the last 400 plus years, since the last 60 years of black people primarily voting Democrat. I give that, history because it's all relevant, right? Deception is deception, which is deception, right? Manipulation is manipulation, which is manipulation. We have not benefited in no real tangible way towards the act of freedom, independence, and self-determination by blindly casting votes for any party. But in the last 50 years, in particular, the Democratic Party. They've been emotional votes. They've been what we perceive to be intelligent, educated votes, but the idea of what we were voting for has shifted and the goalpost has moved so far that as we try to recount what the original purpose was, it becomes non-existent. Like, it has been wiped. You have people say, we died for the right to vote. No, we died to vote because we thought voting could be leveraged against the killing and the maiming of our people. So we died so we wouldn't have to die. And voting was one of the many tactics that we believe would help ameliorate our situation. But it wasn't to vote for the sake of voting. And you would think when we seen that wasn't a useful tactic in itself, because the way we've gone about voting has not been tactful, that we would reorient our thinking and re-strategize and shift our tactics to do something that is more intelligible towards the striving and achieving of our cause of freedom, self-determination, and independence. So, as I've stated before, and I'll reiterate this point, we have used religion as a coping mechanism. That at one point, brothers like Martin Delaney and Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, and I can go on and on and on, use Bible as a liberation book, liberation theology. We now use it as a coping mechanism. That we have conformed and conceded to the point that it allows us to buy this pie in the sky reality so we don't have to deal with the current circumstance. I bring that up not to distract us from the previous conversation of politics and our current voting ways, but to tie it into that's what we have done with politics. We're using it as a coping mechanism. We vote blue no matter who as a coping mechanism. We've used these things not as a means of liberation and separation and self-determination by organizing our thoughts and organizing our brothers and sisters to galvanize a group of our votes, to use it as a political weapon so that we can now obtain what our desires truly are. But since we can't define what we truly want or what we actually need, we're not in agreement, at least, if we can desire it or define what our desires may be, we're so split on these details of what the appropriate approach is based on those who primarily want to find a better seat, who just want to use it as a means of protest, and those of us who really want self-determination, independence, and the ability to self-define, are put in this position that the vote becomes immaterial. And because we are unwilling to operate, which is the most strategic at the local level, city and municipalities, really use our state legislation to do certain things and to have access to funds and resources, we use the general national election as a primary excuse of why we're not effective in the things that we can control. We've turned politics into religion, while our enemy sees them as two sides of the same coin. They're inseparable. His religion is his politics, and his politics is his religion. That's why the government can politically, legislatively mandate Christmas as a day of observance, that the banks close, that federal institutions close, so forth and so on. It's a religious holiday, but it's honored by the state. They're one and the same. And it's a financial incentive, but it's also a socio and ideological incentive to keep one people in a perpetual consumer state, a slave mentality, and then keep another in a producer who reaps the benefits and the rewards. So if slavery is a mentality, how do you turn it on its head and then take on the mentality of a free man? With that being said, we go to, I quoted one European, so hell, I'll quote another. Alfred North Whitehead. He was a British mathematician and philosopher. This is important because philosophy is not synonymous with psychology, but it's an aspect of, to philosophize the unknown or perceivably the intangible for a person who is so exact as mathematics is important, because you got to have both the seen and the unseen, the material and the spiritual world, to understand or to try to grasp both gives you a well-rounded comprehension of what is now, but also what is to come. He is stated saying, the purpose of thinking is to let ideas die instead of us dying for them. Now, you may have heard Jordan Peterson quote him before, and he says something approximating that, but I want you to hear the quote in its exact original form. The purpose of thinking is to let ideas die instead of us dying for them. We have taken on ideas in our past 400 plus years that have not just been disadvantageous, but have been destructive, that it has put us in the grave. And then we've been now inundated with a society that exacerbates information and ideas and the assimilation of them and the assimilation of ideas, that we are now overwhelmed with different people's opinions and sayings and all of these different things that's going on in the world, and we're just bombarded continuously so that we can't think. And to escape the loud noise of everybody's opinion and all of these supposed atrocities that have happened here in America and globally throughout the planet, we search for now stimulation through escapism. So we do other things that don't allow us to think in a real critical way. Whether it's social media, the numbing of our thought process, where now we're just stimulated through visuals. And then we defile our minds because the visuals that we see in most cases are directly tied to sexuality and perversion and just other weird things that are unconstructive to one's ability to change his current circumstance. Video games, porno, on and on and on. So the ability to think has almost been eradicated from the reality of the layman. But for those of us who think we are thinkers, we have become lazy thinkers, and it's not until our fault itself. We've been so brought down and dejected and destroyed when we think we have grasped an idea or a concept, in most cases religion, in most cases some political party or social group that has done some minimal, negligible things that we believe have improved our current state. We hold on to it for dear life, not even entertaining the ability to be open to new ideas, and new ideas that bring on evidence, that have better arguments and better results, that can elevate, that can scaffold our thinking so that we may now improve and upgrade our thought. Look at the European, man. The European, I'm not telling you we've done too much emulating and replicating of them, but it's some things that you can study, that you can learn from. I'm not saying try to replicate, but it's some things you can study that you could extrapolate, form a knowledge of self that allows you to see where his ability to sustain his power and your ability to be in this state is derived from. He evolves continuously. He takes on the things that allow him to win. Whether he personally believes it, practices it or not, he allows and he creates spaces for new ideas to elevate his society, his economics, his reigns of power. He's still rooted in the same objective. I'm not saying you change what your purpose is or your nature, but you find ways to improve it. But when you hold on to archaic, antiquated, unproductive thoughts and ideas, you will be victim of them. And those things and your inability to relinquish them will kill you. Look at the body from a biological standpoint. The way we have optimal life is the balance of new cells being created and produced and old ones dying off. And the ability to effectively and proficiently kill off the cells at a biological molecular level is to fast, mean to abstaining from eating food so that your body does not use its energy consuming new food, which in most cases is integrating into the body more toxins, more bacterium, so forth and so on. But it is now programmed as a mechanism of survival to eat off. And what it does naturally is it identifies the older cells because they're the easy to eat off and to destroy. So it uses those sicker cells, those possibly cancerous cells, those possible degenerate cells that could cause more sickness or prolonged sickness as a means of energy, and it excretes it out of the body. That's what we have to do. We have to fast for a second of consuming information, of new information or redundant information. Let's take a moment and just process what we already have. And let's critically think about what we've been doing, how we've been doing, and why we've been doing it. And has it actually yielded any real results relative to what we believe we need to be doing and what our nature demands of us? And watch, if you take the time to do that in earnest, with intentionality, think about how fast you would improve, because you will look with the reality of things being made known, how foolish you have been based on the unproductive behaviors that you've been practicing. See, when you're too attached to beliefs, especially in beliefs that have been inherited or not been properly investigated and thoroughly thought out, you become dogmatic. The dogmatism that we have is not always, or usually not, based in a thorough research of our beliefs that we can now upgrade from beliefs to knowing or to knowledge, because in most cases belief is the absence of knowledge. We having a good conversation, you become dogmatic because now you have to be arrogant to overcompensate for your ignorance because you really don't know. And because somebody is challenging the lack of their knowledge that you have, you don't want to submit based on this egotistical component of yourself that again is rooted in your inability to have a free thinking mind, to be humble enough to revisit your old former unproductive ways. You become arrogant. And that dogmatism that is produced by your arrogance is the precursor to your death. The purpose of thinking is to let ideas die instead of us dying for them. Ideas should be subject to scrutiny and revision. Each day, I consider myself an intellect, not because it feeds my ego, is because every day I am looking to acquire information that challenges and hopefully improves, replaces, or significantly upgrades my current condition. I'm not wed to anything that is not constructive to the ultimate goal. And when I get to a certain point that when something does not work any longer, I am willing and ready to disregard or let die stubborn, outdated, or incorrect ideas that I once thought had some validity or some value. Whether it's your political party, whether it's your religious persuasion, whether it's your cultural, social, marital, economic beliefs, whether it's your dietary habits, all of these ideas and thoughts should serve a purpose and be useful to your overall health and to the collective health of Black people. And our inability to abandon non-beneficial or inaccurate information again causes our death. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the mentality and the psychology of a slave. A slave holds on to errant beliefs. The slave holds on to inaccurate information. The slave holds on to unuseful and unpurposeful thoughts and ideas. A slave believes that he cannot change his circumstance or his predicament no matter what, that somebody else is in control of his reality and he is or she is incapable or unable to reverse their circumstance. That is the most errant belief anybody can hold on to. And that's what we've done. So an intellect is continuously, as the body lets die the old unproductive cells, the intellect lets old unproductive ideas die so that he makes room for new potential, healthier, better ideas. And this is the process that allows the turning over for a healthier personal and societal progress. Again, I'm not talking about changing your nature. The body doesn't change. It is nature. You are who you are. But again, in the accumulation of even food, your body has to process the reality, because we don't live in a perfect environment where we're eating the purest of foods and drinking the purest of water and breathing the purest of air. So your body has to filtrate the lies and deception that it is taking in. So the thoughts that we have are primarily predicated on lies and deception. That's just the reality. Like the primary food that we eat, the thing that we need of substance, is primarily based around chemicals and pesticides. I've met a lot of brothers who are wed to Hebraic extremism, Christian extremism, Islamic extremism. I mean, black people who have taken on, and what other social or political extremism, that the reality of their own personal and collective growth is second to the reality of the health of the individual or the collective. I say all the time, brother asked me and a sister asked me, said, why can't we just come together? Why can't we win? I said, that's a complex answer, but I'll simply put it as this, because you want a retort, so I give you one. Too many of us are primarily focused on being the man rather than winning. We want to be the one who thrusts up the trophy instead of being on the team that has the trophy be taken home. We'd rather be the MVP on a losing team than be the sixth man on the championship team. That's the reason why. Winning is not important. Individual accolade and perceived success is more important, because we have learned to operate on ego and not a healthy whole body. This is the psychology of a slave. This would make a man sell out his own people. This would make a man start an organization under the auspices of being for the advancement of colored people, but actually be started and ran by white people. Yeah, I just went there. This would make a people integrate us into a reality, into a society that compromises generations and generations of children, that they now become something outside of themselves. Yeah, I'm going there. The sacrifice of others and the well-being even of ourselves for the potential of a perceived personal advancement. That's the root of ideological extremism. And so, the ability to understand the dynamic nature of thought and the importance of continuously critiquing and revising and revamping ideas in the face of new, better information and reasoning is the part of intellectual development. I X that out, is the part of development as a collective, as a people. We say we want freedom. We say we want to change the trajectory of our people, that we want to free the generations to come and put them in a better position so that they will not be subservient to the ills and the decadent realities of our circumstances. But we are unwilling to relinquish the ideas and the concepts and the thoughts that got us here and that sustain us in these positions. We're unwilling to relinquish the slave mind. And so slavery is not, at this point in time, upheld, though it is benefited by the slave master. It is upheld by the slave himself, because the slave in this time is not a victim of being uninformed to the degree that information is not made available, or those who have a true, genuine, authentic desire to self-determine and to self-regulate, to create a healthy collective in every sense of the word. That doesn't hinder our people. The slave sees that, identifies that, and then rationalizes, right, through a warped, dejected, maladjusted reality and reasoning, that it is more conducive for him to fight against his brother and sister than to fight against his open enemy. Look at that. We have become so maladjusted that it is more advantageous, perceivably, in our own sick subconscious, to fight against your own brother, to kill your own brother, to rape and pillage and steal and sell drugs to your own brother, than it is to take that energy and fight against your oppression and suppression of truth. This conversation, so much I'm looking at it, but I try to stay within an hour, and I get up extremely early, and I gotta get ready for tomorrow. But I'll say this: I want to move it back to Saturday afternoons, which I plan to do so that I can be a little bit more thorough in these video essays. Because doing it Sunday evening right now, it's the only time my schedule permits it. But I dare not bear witness to the truth, and to put out these video essays is so important for me, because at the very least my children can, without question, understand who their father, even though I do my best to teach them personally, but just by the short chance that they need some video proof of what I thought publicly as I do privately, they have it, and they can use it as a teaching mechanism themselves. But I say that to say that these essays are leading up to something, and there's, for those who have ears, let them hear. For those who know, I am building up to a conversation that is very much needed, that has to be had, that may be off-putting, but is not towards any particular person, but is to ideas and behaviors that is unproductive. And those of us who have the ability to speak truth must speak truth and let the chips fall they may, not arrogantly, not self-servantly, not self-righteously, but to speak to a reality where we see death and mayhem being run rampant. We gotta, at least with the most sincere heart and genuine contriteness, speak to the things that we know have caused us to have ill consequences. So that is coming, and as I continue to push forward, you'll hear in more detail the exact conversation. But I'm leading up to it, and these conversations, again, are a precursor and a prerequisite for that. So these are very necessary. I'm very much immerse myself in the psychology of our people as I continue to study our societal ills. I'm seeing the psychology that produced it, and the sociology that has continued to perpetuate it. So these things are important to me, and so that's why you see our quote, our people, from Dr. Amos Wilson to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, His Excellency Ben Ami, I'll quote Rousseau, I'll quote Carl Jung, whoever that can give truth. Hell, I'll quote Mickey Mouse if he says something profound enough that can edify and advance our people and help clarify the message in a concise way. So your brother is not turning down any information that could be beneficial to us. That's me letting ideas die so that I don't die for them. And we have to get to that point. Our religious, political gangbanging has caused us nothing but despair and dismay. And at some point, we're going to have to move past our own personal errant beliefs and get to what is beneficial for the collective, because that's how we benefit the individual. It starts with the individual, but you strive to see how that I can improve my family first and foremost. So as fathers, your primary responsibility is not to teach the masses, but to teach your children. And you come so effective at that people seek you as their teacher and therefore qualifies you. But you have to teach the people, because you have to give, if you teach your children right, a world and a reality that they can go into and don't have to worry about being victimized by the ignorance or the dejected nature of our people where they may be found. So with that being said, I thank you all for listening. I love you sincerely, whether we've met or not met, but as long as you're striving for the advancement of our people, you are my brother, you are my sister. And so may we continue to seek a pure heart to heal, to advance, and to improve ourselves so that we will be the collective that will change the reality of our people, and we don't pass down to another generation the death and dismay and mayhem that we've inherited. I thank you for listening. I greet you in the words of peace. Shalom alaikum, assalamu alaikum, peace be unto you. Thank you again.